Namaskar. Welcome to this session. We have been dealing with Pratyaksha, Anumana, the two Pramanas. And the commonality between these two, Pratyaksha Vritti and Anumana Vritti, is that it is based on sensory processes, sensory powers, sensory involvement. Now, in Pratyaksha, we know that it is direct sensory perception. But then Anumana and inference is also based on sensory perceptions. The marked and mark relationship of Anumana is based on sensory activity, sensory perceptions. So, we can understand the aspect of Pratyaksha contributing for Anumana. Something must be Pratyaksha. So, without anything Pratyaksha, it is very difficult to have the inferences. The very word Pratyaksha is very significant, which you will not find in the words such as direct perception or sensory perception, direct sensory perception. Pratyaksham is the word. Pratyaksham. So, what is Pratyaksham? About Pratyaksha, it has been said, see, if somebody sees something, it is not called Pratyaksha. Because Pratyaksha, if you have seen rose, it is not rose because you have seen the rose. It is rose for all the eyes. Anyone looking at it will say this is rose. It is not just that you are looking at the rose and you say this is rose. But everyone sees rose and therefore it is rose. And the Nayayikas have devised this word, Pratyaksham. From the Pratyaksham means everybody's eyes. So if everybody's eyes see something and declare that it is that, then that is the basis of Pratyaksha. That's why the word is very interesting. So also it is the case of auditory perception. Just because you hear and you say that this is the voice of so and so, it is not because of that it becomes that it is the voice of so and so. For anybody's ears and everybody's ears, or most of those who have heard, they will say it is the voice of this person and that person. So, that's the thing that has to be identified in Pratyaksha. The validity of Pratyaksha is that everyone sees that way. I see a flower and say, this is rose. And that is not the reason why it is rose. Everyone sees that as a rose and therefore that is rose. All those people who see that it is rose, they say it is rose, they declare that it is rose and therefore it is rose. So the word Pratyaksha has that aspect called Pratyaksham. That's interesting, that thing that has to be noted in case of Pratyaksha. Therefore, that is one thing. And the other thing, if you see the definition of Pratyaksha in Tarka Sangraha of Annam Bhatta, Indriya artha sannikarshajanyam jnanam pratyaksham. The contact between the senses and their objects is so important. Okay. Anyway, I recall that about the pratyaksham. Tatra aksham aksham pratiti utpadyate iti pratyaksham. This kind of description comes in Vaisheshika Darshana. So the Vaisheshikas tell us why it is pratyaksha. Tatra aksham aksham pratitihi. Everybody's eyes have the same cognition. Therefore, the word pratyaksha. Anyway, or the in pratyaksha and anumana. Again, there is a difference that is to be noted. Although we said this is a common factor, that sensory contribution is immense. The contribution of the five senses is immense in both pratyaksha and anumana. Both are depending on sensory act, sensory involvement, sensory prominence. But it is also to be noted that the difference between the two. A sensory object has two aspects. The sensory objects have two aspects. The specific and generic, there are two aspects in an object. So the one which is based on the specifics of the object is pratyaksha, while the one which is dependent on the generics of the object is anumana. Every sensory object has two aspects called specific and generics. It is because of the generics that the objects have, the inference is possible. So, pratyaksha will be grasping the specifics and the anumana will be grasping the generics. So, because the objects have two characteristics, such as specifics and generics, these two means of knowledge are able to work. So that's also a thing to be noted, that the pratyaksha is based on the specifics of the object and anumana is based on generics of the object. So these are the observations that we get in pratyaksha and anumana, the two pramanas. And therefore, pratyaksha becomes a stronger kind of means of knowledge than inference, because pratyaksha is based on the specifics of the object. And therefore, Vyasa concedes that pratyaksha is indeed important, indeed valid, indeed stronger in validity aspects. And other pramanas, other means of knowledge can therefore get validity. So pratyaksha lends validity to other means of knowledge, such as inference or testimony or any other pramanas. There are so many pramanas in various shastras. So Vyasa concedes pramanantaram pratyaksha balenaiva vyavaharam labhata iti. So other means of knowledge get the validity because of the strong validity of pratyaksha. So this is an additional information that I wanted you to get about pratyaksha and anumana. Now, we know our knowledge is based on these means, and therefore we call these five senses as cognitive organs or even Jnanendriyas. So, why is it then means of knowledge? Just having senses or having sensory perception, it doesn't become cognitive act. We have to understand the mind behind it is so important. These means of knowledge get validity because of the mind behind it. So we understand to be getting cognition, there must be mind behind the eyes. Because many times so many things pass from our eyes, pass in front of our eyes, but we don't take cognition of it. Because our mind is engaged somewhere else. So the mind needs the engagement, sufficient engagement, significant engagement behind those senses. Many sounds are taking place, but our ears don't take notice of it because the mind is engrossed somewhere else, engaged somewhere else. So understand in these means of knowledge, pratyaksha and anumana, or the pratyaksha which is the source of even for our anumana, the mind behind it is so important. And then proper mind is also important. Precisely we say unbiased mind should be there. That's why we say dispassionate perception. If there is some kind of gravity working on the mind, the perception won't be won't be proper. So that's why we say dispassionate knowledge. Why the expression dispassionate knowledge? Where is the dispassion? The dispassion is in the mind. So for proper knowledge, we require the qualified mind behind it. If the qualified mind behind it is not there, then it won't be cognition. Like perception of the child, seeing fire or seeing any visual object, it doesn't become cognition because it is a baby, it is a child. So it needs to have developed intelligence, developed mind for constituting valid knowledge. The innocence of the child restricts from evolving that cognition or cognitive knowledge or valid knowledge. So the intelligence needs to evolve, the brain needs to evolve. You can't have infant-like brain and then expect valid knowledge to come in. So understand, the mind, intelligence, psyche, consciousness behind the senses is so important. Their support is so important. Otherwise, our eyes don't work like CCTV camera. The CCTV camera will be registering all the objects which can come in front of it. So our eyes are not like CCTV camera. Our mind needs to be behind it. Our mind, psyche, consciousness must be behind it, supporting it, lending support, and then only the sensory process of knowledge is raised up. So understand, that is why in epistemology the sensory acts are considered. It is because mind lends its power, intelligence lends its support, mind lends its support, and therefore the knowledge would come up, or knowledge would come through. So this has to be understood. So chitta vritti is important, and therefore Patanjali's concept of chitta vritti is so important. The chitta behind that perceptive act or cognitive act is so important. It is because of that it becomes a cognitive act. If the chitta is not lending its support, then imagine what would be the fate. You won't get the knowledge, it won't be crystallized, it won't even be received. So chitta vritti is so important behind knowledge. So there is a chitta vritti before the onset of knowledge. Suppose there is a rose in front of you, your state of mind, your state of chitta is so important. If that is not proper, in proper state of mind, your perception will be distorted. So there is a chitta vritti for perception, and there is a chitta vritti due to perception. Hear this properly out. Hear this out properly. There is a chitta vritti for sensory perception, and there is chitta vritti due to sensory perception. So this epistemology and psychology almost go hand in hand when the epistemology is considered in philosophical system. Now, through the senses, we don't only get knowledge that this is rose, this is fire, this is water, this is mountain, this is human being, this is cat, this is dog. We don't just get such perceptions, but there is also influence on the mind. As I said just now about CCTV camera, the CCTV camera is really doesn't have any state like our mind has a state, or our eyes have a state. The lens doesn't have states like our eyes. Whether the tiger passes in front of the lens, or human being passes in front of the legs, or beautiful rose or lotus passes in front of the lens of the camera, it doesn't react. There is no fear. But if you see a rose, you don't get a fear. But if you see a tiger, you see a lion, you see a crocodile, what happens to you? So therefore, our eyes are not biological cameras. Our ears are not similarly biological sound recorders. The state of mind comes up. A tape recorder will not be petrified by a roar of a lion. It will just register the roar of a lion. But if our mind registers the roar of a lion, then see what happens to our mind. The point is, the chitta vritti after the perception cognition is important. If the chitta vritti is distorted after such registration of form or sound or whatever sensory inputs, then it won't be cognition. So understand how much psychology comes in epistemology. We can't just overlook psychology while studying epistemology. And then Patanjali's study or description or mention or investigation of chitta is so important for epistemology. So therefore Patanjali stands out in epistemology, in his epistemology, because he considers the chitta vritti so much. Now, because there is chitta vritti post perceptions, post cognitions, post sensory acts, it really works on our state of mind. Now, although these five senses are called Jnanendriyas, the Patanjali's treatise, Patanjali's philosophy gives us an understanding that these senses are more Bhogendriyas than Jnanendriyas. So let's try to understand how far, how much, how often our senses are uh, Gnanendriyas, and how often our senses are Bhogendriyas, then we will realize that more often our senses are Bhogendriyas. Our Sukha, Dukkha, Lobha, Moha, etc. will be coming through the senses. Therefore, one of the philosophers, mystic philosophers, have said that our senses should be pillars of knowledge. Our senses should be pillars of knowledge and not caterpillars of the world. More often, our senses are caterpillars of the world. See, because human mind, particularly and generally, mind of any biological creature, biological species, will be looking for pleasure, will be wanting the pleasure, will be expecting pleasure, will be searching pleasure, will be exploring pleasure, and will be seeking pleasure. Find out how many kinds of pleasures come without the gates of senses. So most of our pleasures come through the gates of these senses, because our pleasures in a big way are of the nature of Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. Of course, there are some pleasures beyond these as well, where we say, like I call it something called as emotional pleasure, intellectual pleasure, pleasure of the I-ness, etc. So there are such pleasures as well. But most of our pleasures are of the form of Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. And we either perceive Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, or we infer Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, and primarily we try to seek our pleasures. So we will be hunting our pleasures, sensory pleasures, through the senses. So these senses are more gates of pleasures than gates of knowledge. Therefore, a mystic philosopher has said that senses should be really caterpillars, should not be caterpillars of the world, but pillars of knowledge. Archetypal plan has given them as pillars of knowledge, but also archetypal plan has given this function that you can have your bhogas through senses. So most of our pleasures depend upon the senses. And then another purushartha is that to avoid the pain, identify where is the pain, why something is pain, how it is something is pain, and then how to keep the pain at bay. So the senses will be also working in that way to keep you away from pains. So in yoga philosophy, it is said that these senses are primarily bhogendriyas. Although they have potential to be gnanendriyas, more often they work as bhogendriyas. And therefore the chitta vritti of the nature of sukha dukkha or sukha dukkha moha. There are three kinds of chitta vrittis. Sukha dukkha moha, radiating, experiencing, sensing, and getting. So there are more sukhendriyas and dukkhendriyas and mohendriyas. Incidentally, they are also gnanendriyas. But it depends upon our chitta culture. If we are pleasure-seeking persons and pain-avoiding persons, if that is our major aim in life, is to attain pleasures and avoid pains, then we make them sukhendriyas and dukkhendriyas in a greater proportion. And incidentally, jnana comes. And jnana comes to subserve your attainment of sukha and refrainment from dukkha. That's why the senses really work. Now, when they are called Jnanendriyas, understand this. In Adhyatma, what is Jnana? All that you know in the world is not really Jnana. What we call as knowledge in English, we call it Jnana, where there is a major flaw. In Adhyatmic process, what is Jnana? Essentially, what is Jnana? Bhagavad Gita describes this in the 18th chapter. The Jnana in true sense is Adhyatma Jnana Nityatvam Tattva Jnanartha Darshanam Etat Jnanam iti Proktam Ajnanam Yadadonyatha. Adhyatma Jnana is only Jnana. Our academic pursuit of knowledge is not really pursuit of knowledge. In ultimate value analysis, it is pursuit of Ajnana. Because it is other than Adhyatma. So our academic pursuit of knowledge is other than Adhyatma Jnana. Therefore, it is Ajnana pursuit. So we are all pursuing Ajnana. In our times, in our world, when we are away from Adhyatma. So, these senses really becomes, they are given the nomenclature of Jnanendriyas for not most of the time for what they do, but what most importantly they do. See, a person can be labeled as doing something, or by some profession or vocation, we tag a person. Like we say, he's a lawyer, he's a professor, he's a doctor, he's an engineer, etc. So we tag this. Now this tag is due to two reasons. One is, more often the person is doing that, or most importantly the person has done that, or most importantly the person does that. So there are two reasons why we tag, why we give a nomenclature. So one is that more often that is done, more often somebody is attorney, and therefore we say he's a lawyer or he's a pleader. That is one reason why we will say somebody is lawyer or somebody is engineer. More often they do that. More often they are in that act. But that is not only the reason. The designation sometimes comes because of the most important thing that that person has done is that, and therefore we give that tag. So here these are called Jnanendriyas because the most important thing that they can do is that they can give Jnana. Although more often they give us bhogas. More often they give us bhogas, but most importantly they can give Jnana. And understand this quite intriguing thing, that these senses give knowledge when they are in pratyahar. This is what yoga postulates, Patanjali postulates. That when the senses are in pratyahar, then only they give knowledge, because they give adhyatmic visions. They give adhyatmic experiences. And because of that rare thing that they might be doing, but very important thing that they might be doing, the nomenclature is Jnanendriyas. This has to be understood here. Otherwise, by what they do more frequently is that they should be called Bhogendriyas. And they are indeed Bhogendriyas. They give us Sukha Dukha Moha. They give us pain, pleasure, delusion. Delight, sorrow, delusion. Delight, sorrow, infatuation. This is what more often they do. But most importantly, they can do this. That when they are in a pratyahruta state, when they are in pratyahara, when they are in pratyahara and onward states, pratyahara based states of consciousness, they can really become wisdom organs. They really then become Jnanendriyas because they work in Adhyatma, in the realm of Adhyatma. Now, this is what is really to be revealed in Patanjali's concept of epistemology. So, the point is, the senses can give knowledge, senses can give experiences. Now, find out what happens to mundane person, very worldly person, practical minded person who thinks that the world is right, the world is truth, world is only truth, rest the person doesn't believe in anything. The stark materialism. So, this has to be understood here, that Pratyaksha and Anumana will give you not only knowledge, will give you a state of mind. And Patanjali's emphasis on this aspect, that it gives a state of mind or it modifies the state of mind, is so important to be considered here. Rather than in epistemology, they only consider how the knowledge comes through sensory inputs and by sensory activities. Your eyes are activated, what happens? Ears are activated, what happens? You get knowledge of sound, form, taste, touch, smell, etc. The 5 kinds of perceptions. But then they also give us chitta vritti. Having seen rose, your mind is delighted, elated. For a camera, if you click for a rose, the camera doesn't get delight. The state of camera doesn't really change. Our cameras do change. So see how much the chitta vritti matter is there in senses and in sensory processes. So Patanjali's consideration or Patanjala's consideration of the pramanas is totally different than the same consideration by Naiyayikas, by Tarkikas, by Vaisheshikas, by Vedantas. So Vedantis also do deal with the epistemology, knowledge process. But they only look at the senses as something, as instruments of epistemological structuring. Whereas Patanjali considers both. Now, the real knowledge or these senses working as Jnanendriyas is only possible when somebody has adopted and applied pratyaharic processes of yoga. So in pratyahara, they will be giving you adhyatmic visions, adhyatmic perceptions, adhyatmic informations, adhyatmic processes will be raised up. And therefore they are Jnanendriyas. So it's a rare function but very important function. It's not that in Adhyatma you will have to banish all the senses and then go for acts. The senses have to be drawn inwardly. So that's an aspect of or potential of the senses which is identified by Patanjali and yoga and Patanjalas, the Patanjala philosophers. That the senses can be indrawn. When the eyes are going out, they will have visions. So we know that very well. But when the eyes are drawn inwards, again they do give visions. But what kind of visions? Visions in the realm of what? Eyes inwardly. Eyes drawn inwardly. Ears drawn inwardly. Nose drawn inwardly. Tongue drawn inwardly. tactile organ drawn inwardly, they become really unified Jnanendriyas. They give Jnana. Now, it may not be a visual Jnana coming through closed eyes in yoga, or it may not be auditory knowledge coming through indrawn ears. They all become organs of chitta. They become chittendriya, and whatever knowledge the chitta is going to get, they are going to be structuring it. See, even the eyes are playing extraordinary extrasensory roles, which we have not really taken note of. Suppose you want to remember something, and you are in need of a very bad need of memory, very badly needing memory. Our eyes are strongly closed because we want to remember something. Why is it that we constrictionally cleanse our eyes, close our eyes? Because we want to remember something, and that will trigger something in the brain, that will trigger in the memory, trigger the memory cortex for you to remember. You don't clamp your eyes, you want to remember something. You close your eyes to remember something. If you are in very bad need of memory, and then it's not coming to surface, then we close our eyes very tightly. So see, there are so many other functions for the eyes. Eyes have so much of defensive mechanism which is protecting the brain. Huge thud. Our eyes flicker. Our eyes get closed because of that huge thud. It is a defensive mechanism for the sake of the brain. Otherwise, the brain would be harmed. So there are so many extrasensory acts of our eyes and of our ears and the 5 Jnanendriyas, which is also worth taking note of. Now, this is all circumscribed in Patanjali's consideration of the senses and Pratyaksha and Anumana, because they are going to generate Chitta Vritti. So there needs to be a defensive mechanism in case of some such thud or very bright light, flash of light. We close our eyes. So that is a protective measure. So the Chitta Vritti behind the sensory acts is also important. Basically, they are Jnanendriyas for the purpose which I just now explained. It is so important to take note of it. Which they rarely do. Their function is, that's a rare function for them, but most prominent, important function that they can do, they are capable of doing it, they have potentials to do it, and therefore they are called Jnanendriyas. The nomenclature is not because of what they do frequently more often. Then the other thing to be noted here, that we call them Indriyas. We don't call them senses. Because if you call them senses, again understand, one of the mystic philosophers has said that most of the senses, most of the nonsense is the senses. Most of the nonsense is due to senses. Most of the nonsense is in the senses. So the senses do more nonsense than even our mind. The senses do more nonsense than our mind because they are bhogendriyas. So it doesn't really justify to call the senses as senses because there is more nonsense in senses. There is more nonsense in senses, so it doesn't justify to call senses as senses. So we should call them non-senses because most of the nonsense is coming from the senses. See, these are all interesting revelations by mystic philosophers in our Bharata Bhumi, Bharata Varsha. It has been long tradition of philosophers, timeless. And so many wise precepts have been given by them. This is one of those precepts. So we don't call them senses. If more often there is nonsense, why will you call that it is a sense? It will not be sense when most of the time it is in nonsense. So therefore we don't call them senses. We call them indriyas. Indriyas. The word indriyas has Indra. What is Indra? Who is Indra? Indra is king of gods. Indra is the deity who is the king amongst all the deities. And therefore, these are his. Therefore, in the constitution of the senses mentioned by the yoga, the philosophy, the adhyatma is that each of the sense organ has presiding deity. Aditya Devata for eyes. Dig Devata, that is the deity of ether, space, is behind the ears, presiding deity of the ears. Then there is Vayu Devata behind tactile organ. So there are presiding deities behind the senses. The 5 Jnanendriyas have 5 presiding deities. 5 Karmendriyas have 5 presiding deities. The 4 Antarendriyas have 4 presiding deities. There are 14 Indriyas, not 14 senses, but 14 Indriyas. And these 14 Indriyas, that is 5 Karmendriyas, 5 Jnanendriyas and 5 Antakaranendriyas, the 14 deities are mentioned in an Upanishad called Subala Upanishad. So that will give you information who is the presiding deity of each of these senses. And the Indra is the king of all these deities. Therefore, it belongs to him. Therefore, they are called Indriya, Indriyas, Indriya. Like Bharat and Bharatiya. It is Indra and Indriya. So that is the suffix. By suffix to Indra, it becomes Indriya. So that is an important. So now we understand that the senses have totally a different kind of the entity. Their entity is identified differently once we know that there are presiding deities and there are Indriyas. The senses don't have this status. Indriyas have this different status. And this Pratyaksha Anumana are both dependent on sensory acts, sensory involvement, sensory participation, sensory contribution quite significantly. So that's why this was an additional information that you get as student of epistemology in Patanjala system, Patanjala Darshana. And of course the Vedic Darshanas do endorse with the Adidaivic support behind the senses. And therefore it's an important thing to be considered. So we saw the Indriya Pratyaksha and Anumana Pramanas, the 2 Pramanas, which take recourse to the specifics of object and generics of the object, specific characteristics of the object and generic characteristics of the objects. And because of the 2, we are able to have validity to Pratyaksha and Anumana, the 2 Pramanas. The 3rd Pramana comes to be Agama Pramana. Now, Agama Pramana is, in the philosophical system of India have been given different nomenclatures. There is Shabda Pramana used by some of the philosophers. Shabda Pramana, Apta Pramana, Shruti Pramanya, Shastra Pramanya. Shabda Pramanya, Shruti Pramanya, Shastra Pramanya, Apta Pramanya. So, for one and the same processes, these different nomenclatures are given by different philosophers in India. So, what is Agam Praman to Patanjali is Shastra Pramanya to Vedantins. It is Shabda Pramanya to Naiyayikas, because they call it Shabda Pramanya. So, Shabda Pramanya, Shastra Pramanya, Shruti Pramanya, Smriti Pramanya, Apta Pramanya. Apta means a person who is trustworthy. Because we believe the words of even trustworthy people, they also become valid kind of perceptions for us. Because an authority has said or trustworthy person has said. So the person should be either trustworthy and or authority, and then combination thereof. That's called Apta Pramanya. So Patanjali opts for Agama Pramanya. What is Agama? Etymologically it means the knowledge which comes to our footsteps is Agama. Because in our tradition, we have this pair of Agama, Nigama. The Nigama means Vedas, and Agama means the knowledge that is brought to our doorsteps by Rishis, Munis, and trustworthy people. So they bring the knowledge to our footsteps, doorsteps. And therefore, Agama Pramanya, it is the nomenclature given to it. While the knowledge at the source, like Vedas, means knowledge at the source. So therefore, they are called Nigamas. Vedas are called Nigamas. And when the same knowledge is given to us by our Guru, by our trustworthy teachers, trustworthy Gurus, authority bearing people, trustworthy people, then they bring the knowledge to our doorsteps. That is why the word Agama. And Patanjali has opted for Agam Pramanya than Shastra Pramanya. Because he could have also said Pratyaksha Anumana Shastram Pramanam. Or Pratyaksha Anumana Shabda Pramanyam. Now, it is also called Shabda Pramanya because it is in verbal form. All these instructions or Agama, Nigama, the scriptures, they come in verbal form. Therefore, it is also called Shabda Pramanya. But he doesn't opt to these alternatives such as Shabda Pramanya or Shastra Pramanya or Veda Pramanya or Shruti Pramanya, etc. He opts for Agama Pramanya. Because it is to be noted here that Patanjali got the knowledge, valid knowledge, irrefutable knowledge, faultless knowledge, complete knowledge about yoga from Agama, Pancharatra Agama. Because Pancharatra is one of the Agamas. We have Vaishnava Agamas, we have Shaktagamas, we have Shaivagamas. And in Vaishnava Agamas, we have this Pancharatra. Now, since I told you that Patanjali got his knowledge about yoga or his discourses on yoga or his guru in yoga was Hiranyagarbha, that is Paravasudeva, who gave birth to Pancharatra Agama by giving discourses to all those inmates of Vaikuntha. And therefore he opts for Agama Pramanya. So between Nigama and Agama we can understand Nigama is the knowledge at the source. Now how much will it serve the purpose for us? Knowledge at the source. When the knowledge flows to your doorsteps, that is more important for us. The door for knowledge is our buddhi. So the knowledge which comes to very doorsteps, which enters our buddhi, which comes to our buddhi, is called agama. Agacchati buddhim arohanti asmat abhyuday nishresa upaya iti agamaha. Shruti smruti itihasa purana rupaha. So this is the etymological meaning of agama. See how interesting. Agacchati buddhim arohanti asmat abhyudaya nishreyasa upaya iti agamaha. Shruti, Smruti, Itihasa, Purana, Rupaha. So it comes by way of Shruti, Smruti, Itihas, Purana. So it gets mounted on our intelligence. The Ganga is important which is flowing through your city or in your vicinity, much more than the very source of Ganga at Gangotri. Because in Gangotri, how much Ganga will be available to how many people to the Ganga will be available? But then Ganga will become available to all those cities which are on the banks of river Ganga or where river Ganga is in close vicinity to any inhabitation. That is more important because the Ganga comes to your doorsteps. Gangotri doesn't come to your doorsteps. You will have to go to Gangotri. Ganga will flow to you. Ganga is flowing those hundreds of kilometers ultimately to reach the ocean. So it flows. It comes to you. It comes to your village. It comes to your cities. It comes to your towns. Similarly, the knowledge flows. The knowledge which flows down to your doorsteps, it is agama. That's the etymological meaning. So, in agama, if we have to understand Patanjali's gravity, it is Pancharatra, the yoga that he got from Paravasudeva or Narayana, Adi Narayana or Mahavishnu. He got knowledge from him. Then you can understand the validity that Patanjali must have given to that knowledge and can be giving to the knowledge and could have given to that knowledge. Anyone would be giving that validity to such a knowledge which is coming from Sriman Narayana, which is coming from Paravasudeva, which is coming from Vaikuntadhipati, Mahavishnu. So that is why he opted to take the pramana, calling it agama pramana. Now, realm of knowledge enormously opens out because of this. Our knowledge doesn't expand by what we are able to see and hear and cognize and understand. Our realms of knowledge, their radius of knowledge enormously increases by having some authority, people who have authority in that subject, who are trustworthy and who are authority in the subject matter. Our radius of knowledge enormously increases. And therefore, Agama Pramana is a very, 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 very strong means of knowledge. And then see how the Itihasa Purana, Veda, Vedanta, Itihasa Purana can be giving sublimity to our minds. When we read Bhagavad Gita, when we hear Bhagavad Gita, when we study Bhagavad Gita, our mind is sublimated. It is an agama. When we read and study and understand and hear Upanishads, our mind becomes sublime. So see the power of agamas. All that you hear from someone or anyone is not agama. So the agama has been defined later. Who is really capable of giving agama? Whose audition is agama for you? Whose book having read becomes agama? Reading newspaper, etc., reading any gossip magazine, etc. It's not just reading. A shastra dhyana, shastra study. So they sublimate our mind enormously, immeasurably. So Agama Pramana is so important to not only expand our range of knowledge, jnana, in the true sense of the term jnana, but also sublimate our minds. Because as I said today itself, that by pratyaksha anumana vrittis, our mind is changed. It can be transformed, it can be transmuted, it can be muted. So by agama, it will not be muting, it will be transmuting. All that the eyes will see and ears will hear is not necessarily sublime. It can be sublime, it may be sublime, it should be sublime. But when it comes to agama, that object through which you are going to get this agama vritti, it's going to invariably give you sublimity. It is going to give you that ethereal state, sublime state. Therefore, agama pramana is so important. When we are trying to culture our chitta, their contribution is mighty, extremely mighty, compared to pratyaksha and anumana. So, agama pramana means testimonial cognitions, hearing the wise people, hearing trustworthy people, hearing noble people, or reading the gospels of such people, or reading the shastras written by rishis and munis and saints, because they have left so much of literature for us. So when we read the literature given by Vasisthadi rishis, Patanjali Vyasadi rishis, then the saints, and then authoritative persons, revered persons, trustworthy persons, they invariably give us cream of knowledge, and essentially knowledge, because that really transmutes our mind, consciousness, psyche. So the agama pramana is a third means of knowledge. So we are going to consider this, but that will be in the next session. So enough for time being. Namaskar all of you.